Thank you very much indeed, Ian. Welcome. I add my welcome to Ian. Thank you all for coming along. I think there'll be more people coming in anyway, but we'll kick things off. I had the great pleasure of being on this stage last year to talk about 5G, and we were right on the cusp of what was happening with 5G then. We're now good 10 months since the first commercial launch of 5G in the UK, and with the help of these guys, I wanted to have a bit of a discussion about where we are with 5G. And I think a good place to start is network rollout. Because that's been a really big story. And when we started looking at network rollout 2-3 years ago in terms of, as analysts, trying to figure out what challenges there will be with 5G, one of our big concerns was all around not the technology, even though there were concerns about the technology, but the physical challenges of rolling out the network. And Karl, from your perspective, and I'll come to you in a minute, Fotis, because you've got a lot of experience from doing previous rollouts, but on the 5G side of things, How have you managed to get on at O2 with regards to actually physically getting the kit out into the places where you want to put it?
So it's always the challenge there. Any new technology that's radio is getting that space, it's getting the agreements with the landlords, and that challenge is never going to disappear, I don't think, whatever policies may come in the future. We've hit our targets. We said we were going to do 20 cities and towns by Christmas. We did that. We're on track to hit the 50 we said we were going to do. And there are those challenges. We're grateful for the support of our vendors and the innovations they're coming along. We've got a really good tech team that are coming up with new ways of making sure we can deploy not only 5G but 4G where we want it. And for us, the key thing is about making sure we can land it where our customers are going to use it most. And that's a real challenge because we're still learning what our customers want to do with it. But yeah, it's a challenge, but we're moving through it and successfully handling it.
So how does it, when you deploy a 5G site, I know some of the other carriers, and I don't know what O2 do, maybe you can probably talk about the other operators. Are you doing a wholesale upgrade of the site at that point as well? So you'll put more backhaul in, you'll upgrade the existing 4G as well. It sounds like that.
There's a whole mix of that.
Okay.
So yeah, we very much target design for what we need in that location. Of course, there are times where we completely rip out the backhaul at the whole site and rebuild it. Other times, the technology there is far more advanced, and we don't need to do that. So it really is a complete mix.
And in terms of where you're putting it, is there a big push on not just the geography, but the capacity requirement? Is it disproportionately pushed into areas where you want capacity?
So naturally, where our customers are is where we want capacity. So we will find a correlation, really strong correlation around where we deploy being where there's capacity and customer requirement. What we don't want to do is start just deploying just for the sake of deployment. We want to make sure where it goes adds real value and benefit for our customers.
So Fotis, from your experience, I mean, obviously you were right there with the whole 4G thing. You were first. That was a tough challenge. I know you were very instrumental in getting the first 5G sites for EE and deploying those. What were the lessons that you've taken away now, looking back on that?
Definitely. So first of all, hello, and it's good to be here.
Great, thank you.
And it is the backhaul was a very very important element. So we that's a very big step change between 4G and 5G, because on 4G we were having like gigabit backbone per site, kind of a small data center, if you like, a capacity. But now this is going 10 times more. So every 5G site we put in, it's absolutely 10 gigs, and then can grow further. The antenna architecture had to change so that we can, I would say, take advantage of the 5G first rollouts, but also think about the efficiencies that we can do in sort of multi-band antennas, and also putting sort of a massive MIMO to an extent that it's not too expensive, because all these antenna systems are going to be restructured into single antennas. So we were very, in the first wave of doing things, and ensuring that the whole thing is sort of well on the radio side, on the ICNIRP, and all those new parameters that we have to take care of, from a health and safety point of view, from the organization point of view. It is kind of a lot of hard work, because on the rooftops there's a lot of stuff there already, Right. So the issue is we don't want to put more load, more structures, but actually with that opportunity of launching 5G, do we have a new model of connecting the 4G and the 5G?
And in layman's terms, because there may be some people in the audience who don't necessarily understand all those complexities, the backhaul is basically the pipe out to the internet, right?
Absolutely.
And why does that need to be bigger on 5G? Why are you having to beef that up?
Because first of all, the demand is very big. So what we're seeing is that, and that was kind of a good story. The fact that we had a proactive sort of 10 gigs per site we've seen the uptake in the consumption. So, with the new, first of all, Samsung smartphones, fantastic on 5G. We see an uptake of about 25 to 30% more traffic on 5G users than 4G users. And that is mainly because a lot of usage of content, like Netflix, for example, they stepped from, 5th position to 2nd position. So we've seen some habits in the consumer market that require a lot of high capacity usage. But to your point, I would agree with Karl. That also that you put stuff where you actually have a lot of people, a lot of probably the first signs of saturation on 4G, believe it or not, and then you're saying, okay, so how do you get more capacity? So you put 5G in those areas at the moment most.
And JK, from your point of view, obviously 5G is this big news story. We've had this situation where, probably not what you want to hear, but handsets have got a bit boring. It's hard to tell a story. They all start looking the same. 5G gives you an opportunity to bring a new story to your customers. You're quite mature in terms of if I look across the piece of all the handset makers, you're arguably the most advanced. I think you gave a figure of around 7 million globally at the beginning of January, probably more than that now. S20 is about to hit the streets. I think some people are lucky enough to get it. What are you thinking about as the person who's charged of the marketing of this to customers? Because we know there's a lot of awareness for 5G. We can stop people in the street, and our surveys we've done recently shows 95% of people have heard of 5G. How do you actually explain to them why they need it?
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. You're right. We started. We've been at 5G now for 7-8 months or so. We were out the blocks with the S10 5G with EE, and then Vodafone very rapidly. Now, of course, we're supporting O2 and 3 more recently. So in 2019 alone, we launched 5 new 5G devices to market. So early phase was, of course, early adopters. We had a massive uplift again with the Note series when we launched that in the back end of last year. And we're very rapidly approaching mass adoption now on 5G. And of course,
really?
with the S20 series,
Okay.
a significant proportion of our S20 product will be on the 5G variants. There's only one 4G variant in there, and quite frankly, from our early data points, almost 90% of our orders are going to be on 5G variants. So, and as we know, the cycles in the market here, there's 2 big spikes in the market. If we talk about the one that we're in control of, that will deliver a significant volume and a regular volume of 5G devices in the market, which will just further uptick the volume. So I think we're quite rapidly moving through now into smartphone buyers out there in the market who are looking for a flagship device, and certainly looking one from our perspective with camera and 5G connectivity at the heart of it. We'll be making a default choice now to be buying 5G. So that's going to be putting volume through core networks. It's going to be hopefully taking capacity off where there's 4G pinch points. But really importantly, it's going to be delivering new experiences to UK consumers. I talk a lot with my team about the very simple paradigm of frequency and utility. 5G brings amazing utility, and that utility will only get greater. So the benefit of 5G for UK consumers as they start to experience it and explore it will only increase over time. Frequency in terms of network deployment will only increase as well. So we're in a space where the only way for that curve to go in the eyes of consumers is in an upward and rightward direction, which is a great place to be. And I think having, and we're very proud of the majority share of the UK market when it comes to 5G right now. We don't take that for granted, but our opportunity is to lay the foundation for UK consumers to start really aggressively engaging and enjoying 5G. So we're in a really strong place. We're really excited about what we've been doing. We've learned a lot, bringing 5 devices to market already.
So what have you learned? Let's drill into that. So what have you learned? I mean, in terms of, have you learned things about the way they perform? Have you learned things about
I think first and foremost, you learn that consumers, are increasingly holding onto their handsets for longer.
Right.
We know that. We see that in the data. We also know that consumers are getting more savvy, so they understand the value of that handset over time is an important part of their process and their decision-making process and their buying process. But they also understand if they're going to make a commitment for a piece of hardware to work on a network that's increasingly getting more and more capable, they need to make a great choice and a good choice to future-proof that decision. So we've learned that customers buy based on future-proofing that technology for what will come. Even if the utility and the frequency is lower now, it'll only get more so over time. And so the benefit they'll get from making a decision around a 5G handset now will increase and will increase quite rapidly. Some very savvy customers will realise that the value of a 5G handset will be worth more in 2 or 3 years' time than a non-5G one. Now, not every consumer will think like that, but trade-in is becoming an increasingly prevalent mechanic by which people are buying phones these days. So that education is not new. In other sectors, it might be new to mobile, but I think the savvy customer will realise that making a 5G decision around a handset now is a good one.
And that's a good link actually into the session that's after this, which is looking at that area. My colleague Kester's going to be there, and I think that might be a good question to ask the guys, Kester, in terms of how important is 5G going to be on kind of residual value. So that'd be a good one. So going back to let's think more about 5G now. Fotis, I've seen some of the work you've been doing, particularly, and ironically, it's quite topical in terms of the issues that we've got with healthcare and everything, and the potential burden. So EE have been doing a lot of work around, and BT have been doing a lot of work around the healthcare space and understanding some of the use cases where 5G can make a difference. So perhaps you could share your experiences so far on that, Fotis.
Yes, just to build on what James just said. One of the things that we see using your devices is the adoption of cloud. Actually 5G is an incredible potential, of a technology that enables you via a 5G device to access the cloud. And I think that is the big step from what we're doing on 4G and what we're doing on 5G. It brings us very close to your way you do your work, your handset, or at the workplace. And that is the big change. Cloud coming very close to your daily work, whatever you're doing with applications.
And maybe we can come on to that with you in a minute, Karl, in terms
of
what you're doing to get into the network. Anyway, let's talk about the stuff you've been doing.
Health is, first of all, because we have deployed in now 71,000 cities. Since yesterday, Mark made the tweet, we have got another 21. So what we said is the areas that we have, great 4G and 5G, especially 5G, there is, what do we do? It's about solving problems. It's about co-creation. So 5G is not here to just, enable a, gaming experience or a great sort of customer online experience, but it's actually to say, look, the evolution of the standards are actually industry influencing. They are changing industry. Telecoms is now part of every industry. And healthcare is a very important area that hasn't changed since about 60 years. So for 60 years we are through the same process, basically, which you are feeling unwell, you go to a GP, the GP will go and interview you, he will then tell you some advices and stuff like that. Verbally, you would take a piece of paper, go home, or you would get referred to another specialist, and then some way you would get into a hospital. That's problem number one, right? So there's a lot of waste and a lot of inefficiencies around the whole value stream of health. The second one is budgets are flat. We're not building new hospitals, we're not building it, but the aging population is really a phenomenon of our societies, right? So there's all these pressures. Disrupt. We need to come up with a disruptive approach to address primary care. So that's what the whole discussion happened. How do we ensure that we don't overload the hospital or the A&E by putting people, because they are so complex, because they are aging and they have multiple KPIs that are not performing very well, and then you have to use about 5 doctors to understand for a particular guy, and then he stays in the hospital, he stays another day, he becomes probably worse, he loses his muscular mass by 20-30%. By the time he goes out, we haven't done anything and he's worse, So what we did with 5G is to say, first of all, can we address the issue? Hey John, can we address the issue of a triage in real time? So we have a problem from a car accident, and we are actually understanding if this, via a ultrasound as a clinician, if this problem is in a dynamic negative way, that you had a car accident and it's got internal bleeding, you have to very quickly prepare the hospital, rather than putting in an A&E and waiting 2 hours, So you can do these remote things now via the 5G. Now we're testing it live through ambulance, using a clinician with VR, a sort of wearable, having an ultrasound into an ambulance or into a care home, and actually the medic is just understanding where to take the ultrasound and check up and down, left and right through a haptic glove, which is robotic signals, and that was a classic use case of understanding the problem remotely. The quality of the video was amazing. That is something that is very revolutionary.
So that's the kind of, to bring it back to the 5G story, and the real benefit of that was...
Fantastic. I was really incredible surprised to see that I could see the patient in every detail, first of all, in that ultrasound, but I could also see because the medic is wearing sort of like immersive reality glasses, and he can actually zoom, hands-free, zoom on the patient and see if he's got a sore. Maybe somebody got a knife injury, let's say, he's in the ambulance or he's outside a pub or somewhere. And the doctor that is, 5 kilometers away is actually, I'm reading the newspaper. But that was a real case. Of course, it was a dummy, which we did the trial. But you could see the very detail, if it was a nerve that was affected, or you know what I mean. So you're saying, well, actually, the medic himself can fix it rather than bring somebody in, to do it. So then primary care could be, like a call center of doctors wearing, VRs, having the different tiles of information, the patient's record, the visibility, the reality of the 360 where he is, and can be much more direct in doing a triage, saving people's lives or avoiding waste, rather than referring around. So that will revolutionize.
Yeah, I think that's
sorry about that.
It's a great example. We've been doing stuff with Amps as well. And the thing that 5G does, it actually opens up beyond just normal mobile connectivity. It is about co-creation. It is about taking smart devices that can do things, connecting them with new ecosystems such as health, and revolutionising those. And what 5G allows us to do is to provide that fast, low latency, highly reliable connectivity. The trials we've been doing, some of yourselves with ambulances at speed and everything else, helps us design that future network. But it also helps us to influence the lives of Samsung. So actually, if you could put this in your device, that would really help us, because then we could create something that could triage remotely and use the cloud and other things. So 5G really has almost been a catalyst for this life-changing experience.
But it all sounds a bit science fiction, if I'm honest. I mean, I'm loving it, and I'd like to live in this world. But I think, there's plenty of places where, if we had people, I get enough hassle on Twitter from people saying, "Oh yeah, great, I've seen you do a 5G test, but I can't even get 2G where I live." Where do you see? So I mean, both of you, it sounds like, are in this trial phase. You're learning where it's going. You've got all the challenges, procurement, and all those sorts of things. If you kind of put your hand on your heart and said, when do you really think we might see this happening in reality? How long is this going to take? Is it 2 years, 5 years?
Can I say, there's, sorry, it is in that frame, if you say, to see how this, but we have to start where things can happen. My view is that we need to bring the future before it happens, so that we can then understand what is the effect of it on the long run, So I would, where we have, incredible coverage, and actually 4G is also fantastic, you can get hundreds of megabits per second. But, being in very, very in bigger areas of where people live, and having care homes and hospitals, and potentially homes, all connected, creates an environment of, first of all, a better healthcare, taking off efficiencies off the equation, because it's not sustainable. If you want to have an operation of the knee, probably in 2 years from now, if we continue like that, 3, you probably have to wait for 6 months, a hip change and stuff. So the pressures are so big. On the other side, it's the digital skills, so people need to be trained. So by doing remote, using 5G, ultra low latency, high capacity, you can do training virtually. You can train 3,000 nurses in different areas by not having them, doing PowerPoint or moving them around. The other one is environment, because by having this remote collaboration in quality, you don't move people around. Just in the greater Birmingham area, it's a city which is covered by 5G. So I think it's tomorrow. We can do that tomorrow. 25% of the traffic between 9 to 5 is health related. 25% of the traffic.
Wow.
Yeah. So even if we cut like 2% of that, the first year, etc., you're creating a momentum of that it is possible. That is 5G is about what concept co-creation, invention, collaboration. We can't do everything alone. It's not like a provider on BT and I'm working with a customer. It is we have to work in ecosystems.
And certainly it will be the customers that will want this and drag this through. So we're working with our enterprise customers about exploring what are those things they want to do. What of those science fiction worlds would actually add real value to them? Because we can all sit here and create brilliant worlds, as you say, but it's really about that engagement with the customer, working with those partnerships, development, and then moving it through at a pace that works for them as well as for us.
Jake, I was just going to jump to you actually in terms of, you mentioned earlier when we were chatting that on the enterprise side of things, 5G has been a catalyst to drive growth. So
Absolutely, and I think we see 5G as an innovation enabler, right, to your point. If we look back now at what we take for granted that we operate over a 4G connection that wasn't actually there when 4G came to market, we absolutely believe that by working in a very collaborative fashion with content providers as well as networks and of course the hardware side, whole new experiences will be facilitated. And they might be upgrades on existing experiences we're familiar with today. It might be around an upgrade of streaming and video on the go, etc., etc. Or it might be whole new experiences that are facilitated for consumers and end users. And yes, on the business side, we're seeing a significant uplift in adoption of 5G devices. Obviously, in and around our launch that's live as we speak with the S20 range. But the adoption of businesses into 5G now, again, they want to future-proof their fleet, but also the opportunity that now is available to them through cloud, through connectivity, through office virtualization. And right now, given the world we are in, living and breathing today, disaster recovery and the opportunity that you can mobilize your entire fleet, but without being connected to the office LAN, and we're seeing that already. Banks are splitting their teams across multiple sites. They're dusting off those offices they've got in far-flung parts of London in order to put half the team in a DR site. And actually, question really, what kind of connectivity do they have there versus what kind of connectivity could mobile 5G connectivity give these people in a world that is not too far away from us, right? The coverage is there, the hardware is there, the cloud solutions are there. So I think that's a really interesting space where we're going to see significant uplift. And I think, probably by virtue of what's happening in and around us right now, we'll all be forced to look at how do we accelerate and change our workforce patterns and our behaviours. And this might well be a catalyst that we're living in right now, which is an unfortunate situation, but it might be a catalyst like this that actually has a shock on how we do things and force us to think about how do we leverage the technology around us in a quicker way than maybe we would have otherwise.
Absolutely. So just for the benefit of everyone in the room, we'll open the floor up to questions at some point. So if you've got any burning questions, do start thinking about them, and I'll let everyone know, and there'll be a roving mic that you can do that. JK, let's stick with you in terms of, you talked a lot about S20.
Yeah.
It's more of a premium play with 5G. How do you see 5G kind of spreading through the portfolio? We've seen some of your competitors coming with like eye-wateringly low prices.
Yeah.
Do you feel the view in Samsung is this is going to go right through the range over the next few years?
I think Samsung's approach has always been one of democratising technology, really. If you look at kind of our heritage of what we've done and what we do, and we're very proud of that fact. I think the fact we've got 5 products in the range right now, add in the S20 range, that gives you a really already quite significant depth and breadth of 5G devices, from ones that fold to a core S series range. Yes, we will take that price point lower without a doubt. Our ambition is to ensure that we take 5G through our portfolio and pretty rapidly. And I think our approach will be very different to other players, other premium players in the market who might start where they traditionally start. So we're proud of our portfolio approach. We've got to make sure that with a 5G chipset, you're always coupling that with the right hardware around that, whether that is the quality of the screen or the quality of the camera wear, etc. There's no point just having a 5G chipset and nothing else around it. But will we expand the range over time? For sure. And I think will we be ensuring that we're true to our promise of democratising technology and making sure as many people as possible in the UK can benefit from the networks that these guys and the other two that aren't here are rolling out at pace. Absolutely, that's in our DNA.
So, Karl, let's talk more about the way in which the fundamental architecture of networks is changing, because all the operators I talk to, it's not just about turning 5G on. You're having to completely rethink the way in which your whole core network works, how you architect that. And Fotis made this reference towards this concept of more cloud and pushing stuff to the edge of the network. In relative layman's terms, could you explain kind of what that means? Because again, there will be people in the room who understand that, but pushing the network to the edge sounds a bit kind of like turning up to 11, and I don't think it's quite that.
Yeah. So okay, we'll go back to those stories and pubs in a minute. Okay. So pushing into the edge. So if you imagine that today, we talked about cloud. You've got all this compute power that sits somewhere in a data center. Dublin or where it might be, and this actually allows you to move a lot of that computing power very close to users. And there's a lot of benefit from that. By moving it really close, you have really low latency. So that means you can do some really clever stuff, such as you were describing around healthcare, so it can really...
So and just again to drill down into that, so by low latency, it's the speed with which the data's travelling backwards and forwards to the network.
So it's the reaction you get, reaction time. And not only that, it allows you then to not only move data there, but applications there as well. That then allows you to do some really clever stuff like augmented reality, virtual reality, things that need that really low latency you can put there. That also allows your customers to do really smart things, or partners do really smart things, where you can put new applications in specific locations for people. So here, you could have an app that is specific for this location and just have it here for 6 hours and then take it away. The ability to have edge capability changes what you can do with a network. It's complicated, but it's really cool.
So I heard an analogy which I thought was a good one, which was is if you think about it like parcel delivery, if you've got like one big distribution centre in the middle of the country, obviously the people who live there get their parcels really quickly, but the people right at the edges, it takes them 2 days. So effectively what you're saying is you're moving lots of little distribution centres all over the UK to try and make that time to deliver the information faster.
Yeah, that's a great example, but it's more than that as well, because what it allows you to do is where you might host something, some sort of application that you normally have. So think of an architect as a great example. Architect has a really complicated CAD tool, sits on a very powerful server. It's something they need to access. Actually, if you do that over a long latency, it takes a long time, it's not great. Actually, you want that with augmented reality, you want that where you are. Edge allows you to take that compute power and move it really close to people.
So this whole latency thing, I hear some, and actually it's one of the other networks that's not here that's been the worst offender, but they talk about 5G and low latency and everything else. Right now, there are 2 flavours of 5G. We have the non-standalone 5G, which we have today, which really is only a benefit from the handset to the tower, and then you've got the same resources behind that. And then we move to this standalone 5G when we will start to see these real benefits, if I'm correct. So if that's the case, when do you think we'll make that transition in the UK in terms of delivering the real 5G promise? I mean, the real 5G guys aren't here, and I would have had a go at them. But in terms of that end-to-end experience,
that's a real journey. So there's definitely a move to SA. I think we're going to see that move to standalone.
SA is standalone.
Standalone. Sorry, that's what lets, as we nicknamed it the other day, lets 5G off the leash. But as well as going to SA, that'll happen in the next few years. The movement of edge, the increasing capacity on the backbone, more spectrum, all of these things, the greater partnerships, all these things add to that 5G experience growing. So it's going to be a journey. It's going to be over a few years. It's not going to just happen overnight. It won't be a revolution, it's an evolution.
So what's either of you, in terms of then the business case, because what I'm hearing is stuff that's going to cost you a fortune, right? You've got to do all this new network, you've got to get bigger pipes to your sites, then you're kind of going, and everyone can have an unlimited tariff, and that puts pressure on the network. How are you rationalising that internally in terms of saying, we've got to spend a lot of money, how do you see the returns coming on it?
So for me, it's quite simple. As I said, we're working with partners, we're working with our customers, and we're exploring what all those different use cases might be. Because what it does, it opens up opportunities. So we've talked about analysts, we've talked about healthcare, there's advanced private networks, manufacturing, there's a whole range of places that actually we have not even tapped into yet. And so I think it's just a case of just pursuing those and following those through and making those work. And we are seeing real appetite from our customers to have those discussions and explore those opportunities, and those turn to revenue.
And they'll pay more, you think?
I'm not going to say what they're going to pay. But
it was worth a try. Fotis, how about from your perspective? Because you've seen.
You put it in the centre, actually. Ben, I mean, it is. Are we going to monetize, and how quickly can we monetize? What is the investment, and so on? That's why the early adoption that we did. I mean, we brought in actually 5G like a year earlier, if I may say. Together with Samsung, we were the first in order to create that ecosystem of chipsets, and anyway, and here it is. From the opportunities around the industries. I mean, I understand the consumer, and that's absolutely going to continue, and it's going to take different form factors too, because we have the wearables, we have glasses and stuff, and I'm sure that it's going to create a real wow effect. It is creating actually a real wow effect because we're seeing a lot of users. The industry is going to be the real revolution in my sense, and 5G is just beyond the standard. Because there's so many problems today in our society that have been postponed to be addressed, and that is an investment that cannot be done only by the telco operator. So first of all, there needs to be full, I would say, national coverage, which I think is facilitated by a lot of these new standards like dynamic spectrum sharing and a little bit of education, if we have time later. But
well, let's talk about that now, because I think that is interesting. So some people might have seen, it would have been a huge story at Mobile World Congress if that happened. This technology with the networks called dynamic spectrum sharing, DSS. So if you don't mind having a crack at
very
explaining
small
to people
crack.
how it works.
It is a big step if we can ensure it the quickest as possible, which means actually, as you know, the 4G networks, we use the mid-band, right, between 1800 to 26, right, and a bit of course low end 800 and so on. In that mid range, by putting the sub 6 5G, which is a 3.4 to 4, you create a unique sort of spectrum agnostic 5G. It actually, dynamic spectrum sharing provides the opportunity for massive quicker coverage, because we already have a 4G coverage. We're already covering like 90% of the UK. So if it was a magic switch to do it overnight and saying, look, we do have a feature called dynamic spectrum sharing, we download the app of dynamic spectrum sharing, and then the whole of the UK becomes 5G on steroids, if I may say, because you can use the whole spectrum of whatever you have. We have like 100 megahertz of 4G plus 40 plus whatever, so that becomes a resource that any user, depending on his needs, can actually extract and use, exposed to a service.
So you're taking all of your spectrum assets and
it becomes one 5G.
It allows you to swap between 4G and 5G and dynamically change to whatever that user wants. So if they're fortunate to have a Samsung phone, they get 5G. If they're stuck on an old, whatever it is phone, they get 4G. But it dynamically moves, and it's a game changer.
5G max. Now the investments are very important. Sorry, it absolutely needs funding from all sides. So if there's an industry like automotive and you're doing a site and you're putting a private network, which we may talk about, using the edge and all that, then it can't be only the macro and the infrastructure. So it has to be tailor made, if you may say, to match that ultra low latency and stuff. And the other one is network slicing, which you alluded because of the SA. That is coming up, say 2-3 years after we do the SA. That would create another new revolution.
So let's just dig into that. I think again,
sorry,
people interested. We're going to say.
Well, I was just going to say, with those types of technical plays, the faster 5G rolls out, the more, to your point around business models and where's the value, I think the more disruption will happen on existing industries. And from a consumer point of view, things like gaming, the traditional console versus kind of mobile gaming paradigm will completely change. In 3 or 4 years' time from now, I would be betting that there isn't really a console market anymore. You're going to be using mobile hardware, cloud, and 5G connectivity, whether you're in the home or you're out of the home. And I think
hold that thought, because we'll come back to the consumers, because I'd like to drill into that in terms of the profile. Let's finish on this network slicing thing. Mm-hmm. Sorry about that, Jacob, but we'll come back. But so on the network slicing, again, to kind of explain it to people, this, and either of you in terms of your approaches of how you're going to do it, from what I understand, this is you basically partitioning a little bit of your network and saying, if you're a big important customer, you've got a big factory in a certain location or a big campus or something, and you want to have your own piece of the network, we can provide that to you. Is that a good analogy?
Yeah, so absolutely. So network slicing allows you to provide services dynamically based on geolocation, who you are and what you want to do. There's then a plethora of what you can do. That's what it does.
So does that mean then I can almost, if I'm in an area that's congested, I could kind of say, well, I want my own slice, so I can be sure 24/7 I'll always get the performance from the network I want.
If that's something that we wanted to provide, if that fitted in regulatory frameworks, which is another thing we need to consider when it comes to slicing, then yes, that would be technically possible to do.
Okay, and from your perspective on the enterprise side, obviously there's probably been a lot of interest in these more, slices of networks or private piece of network. How are you seeing that?
I think there's a strong education that has to be done, but actually, just to give an example, the emergency services network, we rolled it out for, all the fire brigades and the health and police, is on 4G technology, but it's actually like a static sort of, it's like a network slice.
Okay.
It's got its own core, and it's got an SLA, and then it's got like preemption. So if you're a policeman and you're in a difficult situation and you want to make a quick call, it takes priority over a consumer call, right? And then if you have big congestion, you take again priority because you're trying to save persons' lives. But that is on 4G you can't actually dynamically allocate the spectrum. So you would have to be confined to the same consumer spectrum, and then you just take priorities because it's based on 3GPP. I think it was the 13. And if you move into 16, 17, 3GPP standards as they evolve, it enables you to use dynamically all your capacity in order to assign like a service level agreement from a device to a service and so on. So you can be like MVNO, you turn into an MVNO as an industry. So I'm like, Vauxhall, and I'm having 3 factories in the UK, and I'm like an MVNO basically. That means I can produce my own profile, configure my network standards, add users on the network, etc. And it's like, it's an end-to-end service basically.
Okay.
Very similar to an MVNO model.
So this goes back to this whole story of 5G being a catalyst for new innovation in new industries.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
you think,
Because connectivity is part of every industry now.
Right.
Which is the best way to handle it? Is it by creating small independent networks, or is it to team up with an operator that is innovative, that is providing a bigger footprint and can actually make things work together?
so we'll come on to consumer. After I've spoken about consumer, JK will come to the floor. So if anyone's got a burning question, prepare yourselves. Let's talk about the profile of the people who are buying 5G handsets. You alluded to maybe a gaming community might be interested in it. Is there any kind of things you've seen from your consumer research that there are people who are getting into it first?
Well, I think we're seeing a slightly younger demographic, but I think we saw early adopters, as was with things like S10 5G and our first devices on 5G. In reality now, you're looking at customers that very much fit our standard smartphone buying profile. So right now we're in the flagship mode. Flagship buyers are now choosing to upgrade to 5G because they start to see the benefits. They're hearing and already seeing the benefits. There's an awful lot of communication going on across all 4 major networks who are educating consumers on the perceived benefits and the real tangible benefits. And so in reality, customers are still choosing to buy a phone because it's got a great screen, it's got a fantastic camera, it's got a great battery life, right? Those 3 things are the core purchase drivers. But increasingly, 5G will become a hygiene factor decision now, which is like, I also need to make sure this thing can benefit from the networks that are being invested in and being rolled out. So we don't see a massive skew between those who are buying 5G and those who aren't. And as I said, S20, a flagship play for us, last year's flagship, is a multi-million unit device in the UK. This one will be no different. And the majority of those customers will now be engaged with a 5G phone and be able to benefit from 5G. But commuters clearly have a benefit when you're in crowded places. We've all been there where we don't have the connectivity when we really want it, airports or train stations. 5G can fix that. So there's a really tangible benefit there for people who are in that moment. For those who like to game, you need a great handset with a great screen and capability, but you also want great connectivity, so you are increasingly using gaming platforms that are delivering you games over the cloud, and people genuinely use those technology platforms and engaged in those solutions, and that number will only increase. So there's a core audience there who absolutely want to do that.
And have you seen any stats yet? I know it's really early days
Yeah.
from people who have 5G handsets in terms of the way they're using it. Are they using more of stuff? I mean, I know
It's pretty hard.
Mark Lera talks about video has gone up big time.
Big time.
Have you seen that as well?
It's hard to see all of that data from where we're sat because
Okay.
a lot of that is network pattern data. But yes, I mean, anecdotally, absolutely. You're seeing people use them more because they can consume more data on the go. So 5G just enriches the experiences you're already benefiting from on 4G, but you can just get to utilise more of it. So yes.
And how about you, Karl? Is there anything you can reveal on kind of like your earlier? Because we got the stuff from EU the other day that the one thing they've seen, they don't really know what people are using it for, but video definitely. Have you seen a similar thing with your early adopters of 5G?
So it's like we were just saying, it's quite hard to tell. Even with all our insights and our data, what we can see is that people are buying 5G devices. We can see they're using more data. We can see that they are having a good experience. It doesn't necessarily mean that good experience is always coming from 5G. It could be from the investment we've done on 4G. It's not an easy answer. There's no clear answer about that at the moment. It's an emerging picture, basically.
So is there anyone in the room who has Ivan, you usually have a good question about something to do with network or something like that. I know you've been studying
I'm just
it.
curious because
Can we have a microphone down the front? Is there,
Right,
is
you
there
don't
one?
need
Okay. Ian will bring
Let me
it on.
amplify next to me.
Oh, here we go. Here's the microphone.
Thanks, Dad. I'm concerned genuinely that obviously there's been a great deal of noise about Huawei and this high-risk vendor status, 35%. And if you kind of listen to the output from MNOs, you'd almost believe that that wasn't happening. It's a bit like, we're here today, even though there's a coronavirus, a lot of people staying away. I'm just wondering how you can carry on with your foot to the floor, A, financially, because there's no real return on investment coming at the moment, because consumers aren't, by and large, paying much more for the service, and there's no real reason why they should do at this stage. And how are you going to carry on with this program if you have to suddenly rip out loads of infrastructure, and you also have to adhere to this 35%? The implications of that, because other vendors are either not technically as advanced as Huawei, or if you are going to switch, are going to be much more expensive. How do you rationalise that?
So these are tough questions. I know they'll all be reluctant to answer, but Karl, let's start with you in terms of.
Particularly, he's got a massive dependence on.
I think our build base for 5G using Huawei is less than 1%. They are not a key vendor for us with the deployment of 5G. We've made a public announcement around that. So we are probably in one of the better positions than the MNOs. It is a big challenge though. For the fact there are high-risk vendors now is a challenge for us as a UK market as a whole. It changes the dynamics of that, the supply side of that. That is not an attractive thing for any industry. I think government recognises that. Certainly, I'm sure all the MNOs recognise that. It's not a fun challenge.
And what about competitiveness? Because I've seen a lot in the media speculation, and as Ivan's alluded to it, I've seen Huawei's roadmap. They seem to be able to deliver really best-in-class equipment in terms of capacity versus size, those sorts of things. You're using other providers.
Yes.
How are you benchmarking? Are they more expensive? Are they not as efficient?
So we would have selected the vendors we've got if they weren't going to deliver what we required.
Okay. All right. How about you, Fotis? You want to have a pop at the political question?
So it is not an easy one because, but first of all, let's sort of distinguish the core and the RAN, right?
Okay.
Because the core was a decision for a long time, and we are changing. So we're going standalone and whatever. We have to, we're changing that. On the RAN, I mean, believe it or not, we probably were the first to go, like in 2010, 2011. I was the CTO, and at that time there was very few others than Huawei actually on the to do 4G networks. So some of these investments of cycles of 10 to 12 years, especially in areas that you haven't done 5G, I wouldn't say it should. I mean, it does put a lot of pressure on capex, right? But if you look at it in the long run, the capex cycles are kind of. I don't want to be too optimistic, but you know what I mean. Are in the frame of somehow part of it would be needed to be renewed if you want to be in the game of DSS, if you want to be in the game of lower how do you call it, energy consumptions, one-stop shop box and all that stuff. So you know what I mean. So that part is probably the areas that we need to focus first, etc., because it's a time frame. It's going to be a very high logistic and supply chain exercise between now and I think was it 3 or 4 or 5 years. I don't know exactly the time.
It seems to be a moving target.
Yeah. So we're waiting for some of the details, but you know what I mean. There's some 4G stuff. To tell you the truth, personally, I wouldn't rely on for my long-term future because of the way that it was at the time 11, 12. It was not 5G future-proof. You know what I mean? So the cycles of investment are not good in that sense. It doesn't help us, but it may accelerate in order to see it. It's something good can happen out of that as well.
So what about the economics?
Because the 5G is a very small footprint versus the whole footprint. We're still in the 35, right? Yeah.
Have you done modelling around like cost per bit and stuff like that? Because to me, part of the business case for 5G is it's just incredibly efficient way to move data around, right?
Yeah.
So some of the answer to Ivan's question presumably would be, you can see by using 5G you can address the capacity requirements if people are using more video and more data generally with a lower cost per bit because you can just transfer stuff more efficiently. Would that be a core pillar when you're talking about it internally?
Cost is always a core pillar when we're talking about anything internally. Right. I think efficiency of network for us is particularly important. Here we have the most number of customers, the smallest amount of spectrum. We are really good at making sure we get the best out of our network. So it is a pillar of what we do. And it does run into all our decision making, along with what our customer demand is. Those things naturally come together.
Okay, and on the handset side, of course, there's more cost. So with 5G, it sounds as though you're confident that there is an opportunity, customers will pay that premium, but then this idea of the residual value is maybe...
Well, we're intensely focused on making sure that the smartphone market is affordable for customers coming back. So trade-in plays that we've got live in the market now, and other mechanics like that can significantly help ensure that actually the returning customer is given a suite of options that aren't any more expensive than the one they're already on. So that's a big part of what we're doing. And that's a big part of why, in trying to make sure that 5G is available across a range, people have got choices to make. Just on the network bit, Samsung's got huge credibility in networks. They don't actually have much live deployment in the UK, but actually in Korea and America, and recently in New Zealand and Canada, the opportunity that the Samsung Networks business presents is clearly one that we should maybe engage with more broadly in the UK as well. So shameless plug there, but
that's all right. We'll have you talk about networks next time. Any other questions from the floor? Oh, great. Okay, if you could pass the microphone over, Ivan, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks. Paul Rose from Evolve Networks. Question on private networks. What sector and what applications do you think are going to drive the early business case? People who are willing to invest in a private network.
Is it?
Either. Who wants to start? Fotis, go on, if you want to start, if you've got something, and then Karl can add his perspective.
Again, this is an evolution. So the fact that we are first to 5G, what we did is via examples and creative opportunities. So we worked with Belfast Harbour, which is one of the, it's public, and to say what is that, because it's a private area, and they have specific areas, it's retail, it's got cranes and stuff, and that is an ideal situation of a where you could use edge computing, where you need on-premise data, etc. But you need to go step by step. So the first step for us is one of the themes that were available in the current technology, which was like remote maintenance, having an expert somewhere else, looking at a crane with immersive reality glasses, and sharing that sort of video capability. Then you could move into crane management, like having removing the personnel from the crane, because the new cranes you can control them centrally and have precision and have all these ultra low latency type of speeds with IoT. So that could create an environment so we see ports, airports, where there's a lot of logistics and a lot of, I would say, kind of complex operations. There's also manufacturing, of course, examples for, is it Airbus, is it, car manufacturing? These are areas that require, reliable communications, resilience, but also, I would say, data cloud operations that are more edge rather than, talking up. So I think that when we say private networks, it has to be adapted to the context, but increasingly we see on-premise as a very important factor, data. And that puts sort of interest for MNOs, I would say, if you want to get into that area, that just by connectivity, we're not resolving all the futures. We need to step up into the orchestration of these networks. What do we do with data? How do we become the security, the trusted partner in order to use that data locally and then use the cloud only when it's kind of really, really important for industry, I'm saying.
And Karl, we've had the example of Belfast. Yeah. Have you done any projects you can talk about yet?
Yes, we've got a number going on around industry, around looking at how we use manufacturing plants, how we get connectivity with the water industry as well. I think building on what was just said, it is about providing that secure environment. It's about providing premise capability around data and applications, and being able to build a partnering ecosystem that can use mobile technology at that location for what that customer wants. And it's about tapping into the fact that you get that secure, high speed, very mobile capability inside your on-premise or location, where you can do all these whizzy things, but it also means you can take some of that when you go remotely as well, because you're connected into a mobile network that allows you to take that app somewhere else that you may not have been able to do before.
And why would I do that in fact? Why wouldn't I use Wi-Fi 6? Why would I use something like 5G? Because that's hard, right?
Well,
I mean, what's the rationale for putting 5G in a factory, for example?
So the rationale for putting 5G in a factory is as simple as it comes with a whole control mechanism, it comes with a whole load of standards that are very clear, it comes with a set of spectrum that is managed, and it has an operator who's there and able to help you replicate that in several different locations or in a remote location. So I think that's probably it.
Okay.
Can I add, Karl? I mean, it's very correct. But it's not just about 5G as a technology. I think you need all the ingredients of a converged network. You need fiber. You need Wi-Fi is being perceived as less secure than 5G.
Right. Okay.
And
So
security is very, very prime. So you would see, I think in the next 2 years there would be a 5G first rather than any Wi-Fi. So that is very important. And then you have SD-WAN, so networks that you can connect many locations together. So it's not just about the 5G. I think we need to see it as a set of.
So it's just one of the pillars of an
Yeah.
Did that answer your question, Paul?
Yeah.
Did you get
If
what
you want to add something, maybe yourself. Yeah.
You're really just looking then, so latency, is that factoring any of these, or is it, as you said, mostly on-prem data? So is the
And applications as well. Yeah.
Certainly manufacturing latency is a big issue. If you think about managing robotics, you want very low latency to be able to control those robotics. Removing, for example, cable connectivity to a robot is really quite useful because it reduces your costs for maintenance, but it also means you can move that robot to wherever you want without having to reroute it. That's a great example of where private networks, low latency, 5G technology can help.
Good. Any other questions?
I'll
Okay,
just
go
add
on
to
then.
that point. The one thing that I find slightly curious is that
Can you use the mic for the thanks.
you've got 40 megahertz of spectrum on 5G at the moment, and obviously it's 130 megs coming up for auction, so you'll get a little bit of that. But there's 400 megahertz of spectrum, which any business, in fact, even an individual, particularly a pioneering one like Ben, if he wanted 400 megahertz for his house, he could get it. It cost him £3,200 per annum, which is not much when you think you spend hundreds of millions for 40 megahertz of spectrum. And I think that the MNOs that are able to leverage that asset to their advantage, rather than try to use their dedicated spectrum to both manage high volume applications, high intensity applications, as well as the outside environment, you're going to bump up against a capacity problem. And every private network you deploy using your own spectrum, you're going to have frequency planning people pouring all over it. And if the customer wants more data, more capacity, you're going to have to deal with how you rationalize that against the outside environment. So if you want to make private networks successful and happen, utilize the 400 megahertz of spectrum, which people can deploy for buttons, and that's the way forward.
Well, the low end spectrum.
No, 3.8 to 4.2.
Yeah.
Ofcom has licensed that. It's £80 a year for 10 gigs,
Oh, yeah.
10 megahertz.
Mm-hmm.
You want 100 megahertz, it's £800 a year,
Mm-hmm.
and that's location specific. So if I've got a building and it's got 8 floors, I can put in 50 access points if I want to. But I mean, your point about Wi-Fi 6, totally agree. Security is not there. You get jitter problems if you're using virtual applications, and it's also you can't manage it because you don't own the spectrum. Whereas the beauty with the Ofcom initiative, once the devices come back, and that's perhaps a question for you, is that only you will have access to that spectrum in your vicinity, in your area.
So
50 meter
Karl,
radius.
it sounds like you know a bit about this. So how do you see that? Have you had any customers come to you and say we'd like to use this Ofcom spectrum together with our
I
public?
don't think anyone's specifically asked for
Okay,
spectrum,
right.
but I think absolutely right. Spectrum is an asset. There's a whole range of different assets, and while I play down Wi-Fi, that has a place to play into this as well. And the shared spectrum absolutely has a place to play. And I think what is really important is that operators do see that whole opportunity and do use all that. And certainly as O2, we're looking at that whole place, as well as automation. You talk about hundreds of frequency planners. I don't want a single frequency planner near it at all. I will have automated systems that manage that for me. That is the world we're moving towards.
But you don't want a situation where an enterprise customer with a huge application for 5G is being constrained by a bunch of teenagers outside streaming movies.
No,
You
absolutely.
just don't want that.
Yeah, sure.
And if you've only got 40 megahertz, then
Yeah,
And that's why,
hands-free.
that's why, as you say, mixture of spectrum utilisation is really important.
And the opportunity is like private network to be agnostic if it's whose spectrum it is. It should be a capability to use the spectrum that's for the industry, but also potentially connecting into a hybrid mode because industries need to collaborate via bigger distances to other locations. So we see more or less a integration between a private area and a hybrid network and a macro network. Yeah.
Did you have another question?
No, I have two comments actually.
Okay.
How do I tell my children they can't have my PS4 now? It's fine.
I'll let you know.
JK, thank you.
JK will sell you an expensive smartphone.
Well, my dad asked the really clever questions here, Ivan, but prosaically, you know, I understand that the 5G rollout with EE and maybe others is slow or behind and over budget. And when are we going to get
No,
these?
we're not slow. We are 71,000 already.
I hear you're behind forecasting and over budget, and you've got landlords that need more power, they need more strengthening on sites, and
But
lot
we
more
still are,
space.
you know, we already covered 26% of the population.
I mean, anecdotally, and I'm
In 10 months, which is
it
kind
is,
of
it is getting better. Just
Yeah.
you see more of it, but I realise it's a rolling out a network's hard.
Well, the question I have is about to deliver these services need a lot of expertise on the ground, and you know, utility providers networks are typically unable to deliver that. You know, there's a whole flaws of people here in the channel, the independent channel, delivering solutions close to customers. And how do you fill that gap when you know, some of the things you've said, the great solutions you outlined there about the factory, they need real experts on the ground, and where those people going to come from, and over what time frame?
Okay.
Spot on. Future skills are going to be a key thing, and that's across not only just in the network space, that's across our industry. I'm sure all of us have got plans to develop, train and upskill our own staff and our partners that we work with. It will take time. Part of the reason why that will take time is because we are all still exploring and fully understanding what that technology can do. Part of it is creating time. So we're investing in data and automation to free up time so we can train people to do those next exciting things. But it is part of that 5G journey.
Yes. I think it's a combination of you know, ambition and real good planning, actually. I mean, definitely the evolution into the enterprise requires sectorial knowledge, sector knowledge. It requires capability to integrate. The good thing about us as MNOs, if you like, or at least, is that we have a network-centric architecture that enables you to integrate applications very quickly through an IMS system, etc. You don't require very highly sophisticated IT in order to get all that stuff done. And 5G enables that roadmap easier than if you are, you know, just, you know, any sort of operator that hasn't had that 5G. So, you know, getting applications to do remote maintenance with immersive reality or you know, virtual reality is very. We did sort of the health or the Belfast thing in weeks, you know, in the sense that because you need an IMS system that enables you to configure any sort of application, any service to a particular customer. So, you know, using sort of integration capabilities on your network provides a fantastic advantage to step into that era. You know, and as these standards evolve, I don't see integrators doing that, for example, because they don't have the network, you know. So we are in a privileged position to engage with the industries and build those skills. But we need to extract oxygen to do this. And the oxygen is coming from consolidation of the networks, consolidation of our IT, a lot of RPA, a lot of robotics internal in order to get oxygen, because we can't overinvest all the time. You know?
Okay, well, I'm afraid we are out of time, but just to summarise in terms of the things I've heard, I think, because hopefully we'll be able to do this again next year, new technology developments, I think dynamic spectrum sharing, I saw a lot of enthusiasm from you both, so that will hopefully free up a lot of capability. I heard from JK that you're going to sell millions of 5G handsets this year in the UK, so that's very encouraging in terms of building the base of users, and I think we can all agree that there's going to be lots of new applications. So please join me in thanking the panel. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.